everybody, and welcome to Decision Makers, the show where we dig into what it takes to run a town. This week, we are here with Jeff Braun, who is representing the Neepawa Area Planning District, which is an area that I know very little about, so we will have a lot to talk about. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to start right at the fundamentals because, and eagle-eyed viewers will notice I have a list here, which I don't normally have because I am a lifelong renter. I know very little about the planning district and what you guys do. So, what is a planning district? What do you do?
What is a planning district? So a planning district, so my office, we would regulate land use in both how land is used and the development of buildings, construction of buildings within those lands. So what a planning district is, so we are our own office, but we are made up of three partners, which being the town of Neepawa, the RM of Rosedale, and the municipality of Glenelg Lansdowne.
Okay.
So we do that land use, which is administering like the zoning bylaws, the building bylaws, the building codes, the permitting inspection for all the properties within those three municipalities.
And those are documents that are not just local to municipality. You have provincial regulations. Do you have federal regulations as well?
Pretty well, it starts at the provincial level for
Yeah.
us. So yeah, we follow under. Basically, it starts with the Municipal Act, which gives the municipalities the power to create a planning district.
Yeah.
From there, it stems into, in my office personally, we're regulated under what's called the Planning Act. And the Planning Act gives us the authority on the bylaw creations. So it starts at the Municipal Act provincially, and then we jump into the Planning Act, and that's where we develop both bylaws for, the planning district. We have our own set of bylaws which govern our office and the operation of our office.
Okay.
Plus, we also govern the various bylaws that the town and planning or municipalities
Right.
under. So
Which, again, are not the same. You said you have three partners.
correct, yeah.
Are they very different? Are they a little bit different?
So it starts. So the planning district, the planning district has basically our first plan, and it's called a development plan.
Okay.
And what that is, it creates the broad guideline, an overview or a goal that the members want to see the district grow to. So it sets out its own maps, it has its own policies, and those maps and those policies give the individual town and the municipalities the ability to create the specific bylaws.
Okay.
So the development plan is more of a general overview, which gives the powers for the municipalities to create the specifics. So let's say when we talk zoning, when we talk a zoned residential, right?
Yeah.
The development plan, which is the planning district's bylaw, would say
Yeah.
residential. But then it would outline the policies that a residential requires. And then the town or the municipality would adopt not a residential, but it would be a specific, like a residential single dwelling zone.
Oh, I see. So that's
So
where
it-
those come from.
Correct. Yep. So and then of course both have to work together. So
Right.
a zoning bylaw can't change without the development plan being in line.
Okay.
So that's a lot of times confusing for people because it adds a lot of step, but it's
And
a step that we
the
have
development
to follow.
plan applies then just to your office and your area, or?
Right. The development plan
Okay.
is the Neepawa Area Planning District's
Okay.
bylaw, but it is an overview of all the members.
And then across the province, every area will have its own planning district.
It is their option to be
Okay.
part of a planning district. So not all municipalities in the province are in a planning district.
Okay.
Some municipalities operate independently on their own, but they still have to follow the same guidelines in the acts that
Right.
we do. So they would create their own development plan for the municipality. They would have their own zoning bylaw.
Okay.
And I guess the benefit of a planning district is it takes costs off of the municipalities in town.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they would be hiring an individual like myself in each one.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously they would incur the full costs of that work. They would also get the permit costs, but I mean, in
Yeah.
our instance with our staff, we're pretty well self-run. So we operate within our own budgeting requirements. So So it depends how active the municipality is. They can take real benefit off of being part of a planning district without having to employ that, right?
And I would imagine
Get that
that
service.
we're fairly active here.
Town of Neepawa for sure is.
Yeah.
I mean that's definitely the largest partner. But I mean the municipalities, based off like I mean they're more ag based, so like I mean they have their own.
Yeah.
They have their own considerations that the town doesn't. So like when we speak of the differences. Obviously, the town of Neepawa is varying substantially from my municipalities, but my two bylaws in my municipalities will be probably 95% similar.
Yeah.
So.
But then you'll also be seeing things like large agricultural buildings,
Right.
storage.
Yep. The use of the livestock on the land.
Yeah.
I mean, because provincially it's legislated how many animals or animal units are on the property and how they're being used. So we would review that in the municipalities and obviously not in the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably to a very much lesser degree in the town.
Yeah, like none.
That's not. Yeah.
Should be none.
Hopefully it's none. If you cattle in your yards, please don't do that.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah.
So, and then I think with a planning district as well, at least in my thoughts, because you border on these other ones, you don't necessarily want to have hugely different regulations from one to the next, because neighbors could
Correct.
theoretically be in two different municipalities.
Yep, or across the road from them, they could own land. Yep. But I mean, so we do get input when they do make a bylaw change.
Yeah.
Like legislative-wise, they are required to contact the planning district if there's a change next to us, like through bylaw creation or amendment.
Yeah.
So we do get the opportunity to review it, and we do get the opportunity to comment. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yes, we
Yeah.
and our partners that are engaged in the same thing we're relatively similar. There's not a varying.
I mean, the example, of course, I'm thinking of is Langford or North Cyprus Langford, which
Correct,
is literally across the road.
Right. Then like they border the town of Neepawa and two of my municipalities. So when they make a change, we have to look through three of the bylaws, right? So
Yeah. And just for people who are watching this to understand, you aren't responsible for that. That's not part of your district. You don't really have any control over that.
North Cyprus Langford?
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
Nope. Same thing. We drive through it, but anything within there is, they're not part of our planning district right now. So
I'm going to refer to my sheet here now for the first time. Okay, so yes, I wanted to get down to some, and again, this is for my benefit. Maybe people watching don't know a lot of this as well. Basic terminology. What is conditional use? What is a variation?
Okay.
What are these things that might hear about?
Well, I guess we'll stand back. So that comes from obviously this. Yet again, it starts at right at the municipal act, provincial act, or planning act. So when we talk about those, that stems out of our zoning bylaw. Our zoning bylaw is created in a manner. So we have various tables for the various uses, and in those tables it outlines the use of land.
Okay.
And when our office reviews it, we see a table, and the table either says a P, which is permitted, or a C, which is conditional use.
Okay.
And if it's not noted in there, it's not allowed.
Yeah.
The P meaning it's permitted use. So an applicant that comes to us, we review it. If it's a P, in our office, we can proceed with the application.
Okay.
If it's a conditional use, that means that it has to be reviewed by council.
Okay.
By means of public hearing. And I mean, that's when our acts come into play, because those acts indicate how we hold a public hearing, how we notify applicants, who we notify, and timelines in which they have to be notified. So when it's conditional, and usually the conditional use ones are ones that are viewed as potential conflicting uses for that specific zone.
Okay.
And that's when we see you have a potential conflicting use that gives the public the opportunity to review it, and it gives the public the opportunity to comment to council if they're in favor of it, if they're not in favor of it, and reasons why.
Okay.
And then council will review those considerations and make a decision for our office. They'll either reject the application, and then in our office it's done. They would have to reapply a different manner, or they approve it. They either approve it how it's presented, or they can approve it and they can apply conditions. So I mean, if an individual from the public came in and they had a concern for a specific reason, they could note that reason within it. So they could get approved, but they have to do this.
So what would be an example of something that would maybe be conditional use for something in town?
Well, that's a hard one without a specific. Boy, that's a hard one for me to just come up with without a specific.
Something that maybe someone would have an objection to, like
we'll use, like, because we have industrial we have industrial zoned lands. So like something that would be conditional use, like, I mean, an industrial would hold a wide variety, but you're more like things like anhydrous ammonia or fuel storage, things that may pose whether it's a health or a safety concern to the neighboring properties. Those items would be where it stems in. Like if it's something that's viewed as very very safe and not very hazardous,
that's probably just
that would be permitted.
Yeah.
Whereas something that would cause concern to neighboring properties.
It's something like levels of noise or something. Would that be under conditional as well?
Noise, odors, use.
Okay. So anything would really affect neighboring properties rather than just your own property.
Correct. Yeah. Or uses.
Or use. Okay.
Incompatible uses, right? And when we speak of variations, so a variation would be say a similar application came in, and we we had a use table that we just spoke about. Mm-hmm. We also have what's called a bulk table, and that bulk table indicates the setbacks from property boundaries, heights, items like that. So if an application comes in, parking is one. If an application comes in that doesn't meet those requirements, the applicant has the right to vary it, which means, say I have a 25-foot front yard, but my design calls for 20 feet.
Right.
That would be a variation because they're varying a specific indicated item in the zoning bylaw.
Okay. Are there limits to how much you can vary?
Well, no. I mean, a person could ask for whatever they want up to their property edge, but I mean, obviously that comes with larger concerns, both for neighboring properties and their own, and also types of construction. So no, a person can vary it to virtually nothing, but I mean, we review those processes and we give recommendations just from, past applications that either have, and then of course we also give, if you're varying a building too close to the boundary, it has also building code implications for fire protection and fire spread.
Yeah.
So we give the applicant those options, and then they make a decision off there.
And certainly I would think building codes are a lot less flexible than...
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the building code doesn't have flexibility, but it also has options as well. But I mean, that's up to the applicant to
and so with variations as well as conditional use, that's when you would be notifying, you'd be sending letters out to neighboring properties or within a certain distance. Is that how that works?
Right. For a variation, yet again, that's the public hearing process on those is where it comes out of our planning acts, and yes, it goes to neighboring property owners. For a variation, it goes to neighboring property owners and it gets posted in in their offices.
So what does neighboring mean? Is that just the people next door, or
under the Planning Act, we're required to do a minimum of 100 meters.
Okay.
So so at minimum, that's what we're required to. Quite often, our office, we'll review it, and then we quite often do a greater one. We personally feel we like to put it out there greater distance than just a minimum. So. But I mean, at minimum, we have to do 100 meters around that property.
Okay. Yeah. Now, these are all public documents, is that right? So if anyone wanted to see all these tables and all this, they're available if people want to read through it.
Correct. Zoning bylaws, they are definitely a public document. They're on the town of Neepawa's website, which I'm sure is going to direct it to the planning district's website.
Yeah.
They're a public doc. Anybody can review them.
And certainly any acts that come down from the province are all public documents.
Yes, definitely. And they're all on the province's website, accessible.
I think people very rarely look for them, but they are all completely available.
They're not always easy to find, but yes, they are there. And then there's a lot of amendments to it, which aren't always easy to find, but it's out there. And,
I think a lot of it's in, again, for me, someone who doesn't work in the field, a lot of very opaque language. about how these things work, which is kind of where your office comes in as well, with any kind of questions that people have about what these things mean.
It's not always understandable. Like, I mean, maybe we do our best to inform the public when it's up of what it means.
Yeah.
Right, but it is confusing. You can say, I'll
Yeah.
admit
I
it.
mean,
Administering
any
it.
jargon in any field is going to be.
It's always a process, and it's always a time process, and
Yep.
it's never as fast as as people hope it should. But like I said, and within those acts, like I said, we're governed on timelines, right? Both for the approving of it and for how we process it. So our office, we're also held accountable under that, because we're required under legislation to have things done in a certain timeline, right?
So that's why things are done in the order they are, and why they.
Correct.
Yeah.
We keep them in the order, and so we don't stray from the order, so that we don't get in trouble as well. Because if we stray from our order and those laws, then that's when we start getting in trouble as well. So.
Yeah. So when people ask, why can't I just build a garage? Why do you have to get involved? Well, there are building codes, and there are safety issues, and there's neighboring issues.
Neighboring issues, right, and even. Like the zoning by a specific, the town wants a specific size, or limits a size. Like I say, that doesn't mean you can't go bigger or smaller. It just means that the councils prescribe that in their zoning bylaw to give offices like me that direction of what we can handle based off of what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then the other options are taken to council if a person doesn't like that, right?
Yeah, and they can say, well, can I do this? And sometimes it's yes. And
sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, and sometimes it's a maybe.
Yeah, and in my experience going to council for the last few years, usually they will go through as long as there's no real issues with neighbors.
Yeah. Our office goes, we try to put a lot of work into it beforehand. And then a lot of that's just based off of previous applications, what has been approved, what hasn't been approved.
Yeah.
And we try to advise the applicant to save them time and money.
Exactly.
Because if there's an application that we know that's probably going to get rejected, we would like to say, you know what, there's a probability that this won't pass.
So if someone wants to go right to their property line, you can say that's probably not going to fly.
Yeah, we'll say the same thing. We'll say, if we don't recommend it to council for this reasons, you're going to know about it, and at least that way they're not, try to save them some time and some money.
Yeah.
If they want to proceed, they're still allowed to proceed that way, but
you can recommend based on.
We do our best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every example is different.
Yeah.
And it's not always the same as what my neighbor did, and that's what it looks like. But
and different
in our guidelines, it's different, right? So that's right.
Different council might approve different things as well. So.
Yep, and it's all based off of its own individual scenarios as well. Like every application is different, so it's weighed on that. But we do try to offer our recommendations. But at the end, it's totally up to the applicant whether they want to proceed with that route or change it or not do it. So
let's talk a bit about zoning.
Okay.
How that is laid out and why it is the way it is.
Okay. Well, now a lot of that is stemmed and it's reviewed, not just so when we have a zone, like a zoning map which outlines the different zones with say we'll use the town or a municipality.
Yeah.
Those aren't just something that's decided this is where we want. We do further, it gets reviewed by what's called the provincial land use policies. So the province indicates a general guideline of proper land use of planning, and typically, and that's used to try to keep, try to create a separation between your heavy industrials and your single residential, right? So it doesn't always work out the best, but it's always reviewed that way, is trying to keep more compatible uses closer, and then feather them out from there. So like your commercial zones, we typically try to see the your larger residential complexes close to them, because your more intensified residential would go closer, and then the further you get away from your commercials, you like to see it tiered down to the single dwellings, right?
Right.
So we do have. And all those, even a zoning bylaw, it's not just a council approval. Part of the bylaw creation and the bylaw approval, it gets reviewed by all of the provincial departments, who have their own set of criteria which they comment on, and so it's a long process. But I don't know if that's the easiest way of explaining it.
Well, that's another thing
too. It's a confusing one as well, right?
It's not just one provincial department you have to go to. There are several provincial departments that they're working with
that
as
is
well.
created under, yeah.
Such I think there's like transportation is something.
Oh, well, highways,
Yeah.
yeah. Like the watersheds,
Yeah.
Manitoba Environment for septic systems and sewer water roads.
Yeah.
Those are usually the biggest one, but I mean even it goes right into out in the rural areas we work with the like mines and minerals for aggregate resources.
And historic resource or
Historic branches in there,
Yeah.
So when we do a bylaw, we actually, I mean, that's or even a change to the bylaw. We work with our provincial entity, which is our community and regional planning office. Our personal one's out of Brandon. They actually do the creation of it on our request.
Yeah.
To some degree, I guess, depending on the change, and then it's their responsibility. So once we've had that bylaw created, it's had first reading, it goes to that office,
Yeah.
and they'll send it out, and they'll bring the comments, and then they'll provide the recommendation.
So they'll aggregate all their comments and then.
Yeah, and then our own local office in Brandon will send that as a comments to council for approval, right?
Right.
So you review the comments, and some are just simply a comment. Sometimes there's a rejection, and sometimes there's no concerns. Sometimes it's like change all of it. So it's a large process to get to where it is, and it's reviewed by many offices
Yeah.
before it gets to that stage. So
And this is kind of why we see, for instance, just taking Neepawa itself, why we have industrial parks in a certain area, why you see commercial along the main thoroughfares,
Yep.
why you see the residential sort of in between.
Yeah, that's right, and that stems out from the land use planning requirements,
Yeah.
considerations, right? So
And so there is such a thing as like a zoning variation as well, or is there a change like from single to
that
multi-unit?
would be to some, yes, and yet again
That's municipal and not provincial.
well, no,
Sort of. Okay.
provincially gives there is there is variations allowed
Yeah.
to some degree in zoning, but they're very small. Like, I mean, it'd have to be to the next compatible use, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm in an RS zone, which is residential single, which would be a single dwelling house,
Yeah.
and I want to put in a duplex, which
Yeah.
is a RT in our world, residential 2 units, you could vary to the next one.
Right.
You can't vary past it.
That was what I was thinking
Right.
of, because that is something we see in Neepawa quite
Yes,
a
we
bit.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is an option to we can do the variation process to the next one. So that's where we would go in our zoning bylaw, and if it's the next one compatible, we can. If it's 2 jumps up, we can't.
Yeah.
Like our office, the next option is amend the bylaw.
Right.
So that now you would physically take your property and you would request it to be in this zone, and then it follows that amendment process that the bylaw is created.
And then you
It
go
gets-
through all these.
gets reviewed provincially
Yeah.
and comments come back. So those are
Yeah.
a large project. Like, I mean, you'd be a pretty big job to do
Yeah.
that. So
And everything we're talking about, all this process, this is really all on you guys in your office.
yeah, well, like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously our administration in all 3 municipalities, we definitely
Yeah.
work with, we field those proposals through them to,
Yeah.
right? Like if it's something we have comfortable with, then we just start proceeding it and
Yeah.
we go through it. But yeah, initially it's once the municipalities are part of a planning district, it is our responsibility to
Yeah.
administer those the towns and the councils. Although with there being their bylaw, the modifications to it come through our office on their behalf.
Yeah.
So
This is just, I'm thinking a lot of the sort of invisible work that you guys are doing is
there's
all
yeah,
of these processors that have
Yeah.
to go on in the background.
Yeah, there's tons of invisible work that
Yeah.
it's a lot of waiting though for us too, because like I say, we can only do things a lot of times the approvals are done. We have to wait for council meetings as well. And we have to schedule things accordingly. So a lot of times
Yeah.
we may start something today and it may sit on the desk for 3 weeks until we hit our time slot, and then
Yeah.
we work at it again, and then it sits because we have to send it to a provincial office for review. And then
come back and then-
there's a lot of that, yes.
I mean, in
That's-
Neepawa, you have council meetings every 2 weeks. In other municipalities, they're monthly.
they're once a month, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And if something's going back to the province, they're another
They're a
month.
month
at
again.
least.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the same thing, like I said, there's timelines we have to follow. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we're not just allowed to let it sit there,
Yeah.
because we have to follow those timelines legislative wise too. So, yeah.
And sometimes, of course, you're also waiting for the person you're working with to go through some fill out documents or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I say, our office gets busy sometimes. So sometimes it's just because the application comes.
Yeah.
I mean, it might take a week before we look at them, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's we have our busy seasons and our slow seasons as well.
Yeah.
And it's also the material brought to us. There's sometimes the application isn't complete,
Yep.
and we have to get the applicants to provide more detail
Yeah.
or more documents to.
Or you're recommending changes.
Yeah,
Things
or
like that.
or give them some options to change, and then
Yeah.
So sometimes we get incomplete applications, but we typically like to work well with. I mean, we advise people if you're doing anything. Like I mean, our office is always there. There's always somebody that will,
Yeah.
discuss the options before you even start, and we
Yeah.
definitely try to provide.
And please ask, don't just start.
Yes, please. Like I said, we would much rather work through it than fight through it. Because, I mean, we don't want to make things difficult, but I mean, we do have our jobs to do, and
Yeah.
it's like I say, we're more than willing to review it on the beforehand, and give recommendations. Then try to work Try to work with the ratepayers within our guidelines, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what is kind of the overall scope of work that you see? Like, what is sort of the smallest thing you would deal with? What is the biggest thing that you would be dealing with?
Well, our office, so we can, our office can, like, I mean, as far as building permit, we can permit absolutely everything under the building code right now. So right now in our area is, I mean, the smallest things we'll see is decks or little small overhangs, accessory buildings like your storage sheds in your backyard, all the way up to right now. Our biggest permit is actually our new hospital.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
we have the certification in house to permit everything under the building code's prescription, whereas a lot of areas don't. But so
Yeah, because that takes like additional on your part, additional training, additional
yes,
certification.
like the larger like the building code itemizes levels of certification required for the permitting stages, and it's the code talks about parts.
Yeah.
Part
And they aren't in order either.
no, well, they are in order, but I mean, part 9, we'll
Yeah.
call it, of the building code. It's one of the bigger ones, and that's more deals with residential buildings
Yeah.
and commercial buildings up to prescribed size, 3 stories in height, 600 meters in size. And then there's certain occupancy. So the building code indicates, and that one is an easier certification level to achieve, and that's the one the lot has. And then we also deal with what's called Part 3 of the code, which deals with everything over that, which will be anything over 600 meters in size. Your assembly occupancies, like your arenas, your restaurants, things like that. Anything over 3 stories. What else? There's quite a bit in there. And also now there's also a Part 2, which is large ag buildings, which is agriculture
that's
structures
different.
over
Okay.
600 meters. And that takes a different level of certification, which, I mean, my board and my municipalities wanted to proceed with that, and we did that. We got, so the town and the 2 municipalities received that certification under my training, because I did the training for it, which we'll get another one going here in the future, just to make sure we have 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, without a certified person, then we're not even allowed to permit them. But so as long as our office keeps that certified person,
Yeah. And if you can't permit them, they have to go to the next.
right?
Like Brandon,
well,
I think.
well, it would
or
be the province.
the province. Yeah.
Which is Inspection and Technical Services now would review it, because they would have the authority unless so if our area lost that credentials, then for those Part 3 projects would go back to the province,
Right.
unless we decide another one. Yeah.
So that's kind of why you want to have more than one person who is
A
able
backup.
to do them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because they're big jobs. There's lots to consider on them. There's you don't take them lightly, because you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with safety of those people. That's the large part of those buildings, right? So.
And like in your time here in the planning district, I think your office has grown, has it not?
We definitely have,
Yeah.
yes.
So-
Since I'm starting 14 years. When I started there, it was just, I took over for the individual there. There was about a year of overlap for training.
Yeah.
And I spent, I don't know, 6 or 8 years doing it myself. And yeah, then of course, obviously the growth of the town, obviously the work's getting bigger, the job's getting bigger. Right now, there's myself. My position is a senior development officer, building inspector, and I guess I would oversee and I would manage the office as well as I do the commercial projects and but we also have Scott Kowalik, who's also an inspector there now. He does more of the residential ones because he's certified in those. He also deals with our subdivisions, and we also have an administration assistant, Diane, who I call her assistant, but sometimes she's well more than that.
Yes.
So yeah, we've gone from a single individual to now there's myself and 2 other employees there. So
Yeah. And is that good for now, or do you see a need for that to grow again? Probably.
it'll be driven by growth.
Yeah.
Right now we do okay. Sometimes we get behind, but I mean the slow seasons we get caught up. So right now we're managing well.
Yeah.
It depends on the growth of the town.
Yeah.
I mean that's always something that we try to plan for when we try to review it, but unfortunately, our office, we don't go out and we can't sell permits. People have to want to build, and people have to need to build, and people need to apply. So,
and certainly, I think with the town then making a large purchase of land as well, that's gonna.
It could change.
It
Yes,
could
it
change
definitely
things.
could. I guess say for the short term, we can manage, but again, it'll have to be evaluated once it starts, and then just to see how it grows and how fast it grows, because that'll determine how.
And that's a mix of industrial, residential, commercial.
Correct. Right now, it's majority is looking residential, but there is industrial parcels in there, and there will be some commercial in there, and some of it's undetermined right now. It's just we're reviewing it just as blocks.
You don't need 320 acres right away. You're
No,
going to do it.
Yeah, we'll do
bit
it
at a
phases,
time.
amended in phases and subdivisions and all that. Yeah.
And this might not be something you can speak to at all. I'm just going to ask it anyway, just in case. So Neepawa has a limited amount of land within the town boundaries,
Okay.
right? What happens when they run out of that land?
Well, the town would have to. I won't answer that because
Yeah.
the town would have to speak on that. Like
Yeah, okay.
I say, I don't.
So that's not something that's going to come through your office at all. That's not something you need to.
Possibly for a discussion point, but
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it would be the town that makes the decision on growth of its boundaries.
Yeah.
Not my office.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we would probably be part of it for some degree for the land
Yeah.
use perspective of it.
Just because you, all, of course, are multi-municipality.
Right.
You might be on those boundaries
Yep,
already.
and even administering of what's coming in, the goods and the bads and and the challenges. So we would definitely have a discussion, but I mean that's up to the town or the municipalities to.
Okay.
That's not.
My main question for you on that one is just trying to. I'm not necessarily understanding how that would grow, but how to, I guess, do things get rezoned? Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, well, that's I guess that's kind of what I meant with how our office would get in.
Yeah.
Because yes, if it did grow, then we would start right over at our development plan, and we would have to make it either adopt what's there as it is or make it suit ours, which is going to extend into the zoning bylaws. So yes, that's where my office would be involved with would be the updating of those.
So that's how
land
that
use
process would work
bylaws.
as far as you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because I can foresee that, maybe not in the near future, but maybe nearer than I think.
Yeah, there's probably have to. I don't know.
Yeah. Hard to say right now, but
Yeah.
I do know that there's only a limited amount of land in Neepawa.
It's running out.
Yeah. So.
And like I say, there's a lot that's viewed in town or around town that's actually not part of the town boundaries. Like there's a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot, but there's elements that everybody views as town of Neepawa, which are actually in the municipality of North Cypress Langford.
Yes, absolutely, especially as you go out on the highway.
John Deere and Napa, those buildings like that. Or
and even a couple of like residential portions out that way are actually not part of the town of Neepawa.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I sort of see negotiations going on around, tapping into town water and things like that because of the.
That's always the town's discussion. Yes.
Yeah, that's not you, but
that's
that's kind of how I know that those are not part of it.
Yeah.
And how maybe people just don't realize that because you go out the highway, you think it's all Neepawa, but it's.
Yep. Until you run out of buildings, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
More so to the east, to the west.
Yeah, right now anyway.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen once the.
That's right. It could grow further each direction.
The hospital goes up and then.
Yeah.
What are some of the things then? Because another part of your job we haven't even talked about is inspections.
Right.
So how does that, what all are you responsible for there, and what are some of the problems that you see that maybe we can talk about here and let people be aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing?
So inspections, and I guess, those can vary depending on the project as to what needs to be viewed under the building code. But the most part, what the code is after is obviously structural elements, energy efficiency, being your insulations, your ceiling, like your protection of your inside and your outsides, like with your sidings and your air barriers, and it also deals with the life safety of people. So. For sure, like on a house, obviously we're looking at all the foundation elements, pre-concrete pours, framing of the structure we would review. We would review insulation and polys prior to the gyprock applied. Plumbing, HVAC and mechanical we would look at. And then, the finishes in between, we don't typically, the drywalling, the painting, the flooring, the trims,
That's people's business.
That's a customized thing, so we don't look at that. But then we would do a final inspection on the end and able to close the file, because we would have to make sure that those systems are in place, functioning, working properly.
No
and,
bare wires hanging from the ceiling.
Right,
That's
the heating and the ventilation works. From the outside, the ingress of water, that its building's protected from leakage, handrails. So, so basically, the pretty stuff we don't look at, I guess. Is
you're looking at the bones.
And as far as, we see so many different, I think the biggest challenge that we see on inspections is the change from what's been permitted. Because a lot of times something will get permitted, and then you go on site, and then they've chosen to make a change, and sometimes it's viewed as a minor change for either the builder or the owner. But a building code wise, sometimes it's we view things differently from our office than the average person. And that could deal with the life safety of people, the fire protection, all those matters. So. That's usually the difficult thing is a change in between the permitting and an inspection that we've come up with. So, if, yet again, we're always there for a discussion, and we don't try to make things hard. Like I say, if it's something we don't need to get into, go ahead, do it.
Yeah.
But
there are codes.
But there is codes, yes. We don't purposely require a new permit because there's a change. Like I say, we have lots to do. So we don't need to add to our workload, but same thing, we need to just be aware of the changes, right? So we try to keep things open and as much communication as possible, for just because we don't want to hold up projects, and that also adds to cost, which we don't want to see people incur costs. So if we can give a recommendation that they can make a decision on, then we love that too. So
I'm just going to run a scenario with you. Say a homeowner out there wants to build a garage. Start to finish, what is the process they need to go through as far as your department goes?
First thing, reach out to our office. Have a discussion with either Scott or myself. This is what I want to do. This is the size I want. This is how I want to build it. This is where I want to put it. And then we would give a recommendation. Then they can make a decision on size. They can make a decision on where it goes. So we would encourage that first, and then depending on the size, say a garage, we would ask for a plan to some degree. Depending on the size, we even have some documents that a person can fill out up to a certain size. Anything over a certain size, then we have to start getting engineers involved in that. So that's where we would advise the people. So we would need a plan to some degree, whether it's just a document from our office that we provide, or they reach out to a draftsperson and have something prepared. If you're very good at drawing, feel free to draw your own.
Okay.
As long as the details in there.
So you don't need to get an architect involved.
Not always. Architects are usually on bigger projects.
Yeah.
If the person's comfortable with drawing it, and they can put all the detail in it that we need without us having to review it 19 times to tell them what they need it, we accept that as well.
Okay.
So the application would come in at that time once we've done the consultation, and the plan comes in with an application. There'd be a fee applied to it, and then our office would review it. If there's any concerns with it, we would notify the applicant of the concern, or if there's some changes. If there's no concerns, then we issue the permit, and then work can proceed.
Okay. Now, once they start the permitted work, what is your role going forward?
So what's the permitted? We usually typically on a garage they're
Yeah.
pretty simple. There's minimal inspections, but we would advise them of the inspection process. So they would be starting to proceed, and then obviously they are required to contact our office
Yeah.
to schedule an appointment. So then we would be inspecting your foundations, and at the same time the foundation is, we would check for the setbacks to the property boundaries
Yeah.
to ensure that it's within the zonings. So then as the project proceeds, we typically try to advise them, if we've done this inspection, what do we want to see next? And then we follow through to the completion of that.
Yeah. So typically, how many inspections would you need to do on something?
Oh, wow. Anywhere like a garage or a deck would be if everything's fine, it's one inspection.
Yeah.
If it's a garage, there would be 3 to 4.
Okay.
A dwelling unit, like a house or a duplex, would probably be about 6 to 10. And obviously, the buildings get bigger, they go up from there. But
Yeah.
an average house would be about 6 to 10 visits.
Hospital, couple hundred.
Hospital, I'm on a monthly rotation, which is probably going up to bi-monthly here.
Yeah.
Just as
Or I
it's
guess the
going up.
hotel as well is another big project that's
Yep.
going on.
Those big buildings are a little more unique, as I'm not. Once you get that Part 3 certification,
Yeah.
the building code also indicates the responsibility of the architects and the designers. So on those, like the hotel, hospital, bigger projects like that, they have architects, they have engineers involved, and those engineers are required to inspect the work themselves.
Yeah.
So my position on those would be, I do most of my work at the front end to ensure that the building is code compliant.
Yeah.
And then I do what we call site audits. Basically, I stop in at various stages. Sometimes it's weekly, monthly,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And basically, I just review that the work is being done to the plan, that there's no concerns, that they're getting their architects, their engineers involved. Mostly, right, things like that. I document those inspections or those visits, and then so mostly of my work's done at the before and the end. I get
You get the
insurance
final
to code
inspection?
with the architects and the
Yeah.
engineers, and then the final inspections, they have to provide their documents saying that they did it, and then I do a review of the building after. So they're a little unique on those ones.
Yeah.
I tend to go there a lot, but I mean, there's the responsibilities are a little different
Yeah.
depending on the building.
Whereas with let's go back to our garage, it's kind of all
Our
on
garage
you
is
to-
100% us.
Yeah.
And we may get an engineered plan, but we would review to that engineered plan, right?
Yeah.
Those would be primarily done through our office, yeah.
So, what happens if someone does not go through that process and builds a garage?
Well, obviously the person gets a stop work order first off, or a notice of violation.
Okay.
And then they have, depending at what stage it's at, if it's completed, those ones are a little harder. Sometimes if they're done, and they're just started, we still have to go through the permitting process.
Yeah.
But they have to prove what was done. They have to somehow validate and prove that we would have accepted it, whether
Okay.
that be by pictures, whether that be some means of documenting the work completed.
Okay.
If it's fully complete, those get a lot harder because it's hard to inspect something done, and they would have to either open things up, remove things. I mean, if it can't be to within a reasonable doubt proven that it was done properly, then they would have to start opening things up.
Yeah.
To prove it or to show it. A worst case scenario, if it really can't be complied, it would have to be removed.
Okay.
Yep.
So there is a process where it could get approved later, but it's
It gets harder.
it gets much
Yep.
harder. Please don't do this.
Permit fees would have to be doubled.
Yeah.
That's part of the requirements, and because with those, as an inspection on the
Yeah.
property, we do those inspections on behalf of the municipalities,
Yeah.
because municipalities are required to administer the building code. So our inspection and our approval it can either put liability on the municipality, or it can also relieve them of the liability. It is, and that's a provincially legislated requirement.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we do it, because the municipalities are required to have buildings permitted and inspected to the code.
It's a safety issue, really.
And it's a safety issue. It's life safety,
Yeah.
and it's also future purchaser.
Absolutely.
Right? A person, if something has been built and it hasn't been properly, but it's lasted 5 years, and then an individual sells it, and somebody buys it, and the roof falls in because it was. I mean, that's now something that extends to other people. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this something you see happening?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
For the most part, not a lot. With ones we have, luckily, 98% of the time we've been able to come to satisfactory arrangements or had some means of documenting it.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been some that have been removed. So we've gone through all various stages of it.
And that's a very costly thing if you're building something and have to remove it again.
Yep. And it's not a fun part of our job either. We don't enjoy that. Like I say, people put money in things and time, and
so do not be afraid to reach out to you guys.
Please do not be afraid because
you're very nice guys and you know what you're doing.
We try. Like I say, we try, but I mean, we have a job to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to work together off the start. People don't always like the rules. They don't always like the codes, but that's still what we have. And
they're there for a reason.
Even myself, sometimes I don't think they're right, but I mean, that's what we have to deal with. That's what we have to work with. That's
you can't arbitrarily change them.
Until they change, that's what we have to do. So
yeah. Are there any things that people like? What does not require permitting for people to do?
So like. Things like maintenance items, right? So you can remove and you can replace windows and doors as long as you're not altering sizes, like altering structure.
Yeah.
Anything like all your flooring, your painting, windows, trim.
Yeah.
You can change out the fixtures in your bathroom, like you can change your tubs and your vanities and your toilets. Siding to some degree, most times you don't need one as long as it's a compatible product.
Yeah.
But basically your upkeep and your maintenance items.
But if you're cutting a bigger hole in your wall for a bigger window, that requires a permit.
Yeah, because they're a pretty simple permit. We just have to make sure that the size of the hole is supported by a suitable structure.
Because there's a possibility of something collapsing if you're doing that. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Are there any other things that you kind of see people kind of doing that you want to advise them, maybe don't do that or do it differently?
Well, yeah, every day. I guess, but I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, I have my opinions on things, and then I have my jobs. Is how I look at it. Just because how I would do it doesn't mean that you can't do it. As long as we receive the same outcome in the end with the building codes and the bylaws. Yeah. And the same thing, we also try to advise people maybe there's a better way of doing something. And
right.
But at the end of the day, our objective is just the compliance at the end, right?
Yeah.
Consistency. So.
And then what are some of the more unique situations that you've seen? I can think of one that I've kind of talked to you about before, but.
I don't know. They've had so many, they've all kind of blended together. The biggest one that sticks out in my head was I was on a project and they had an issues with structures. It was an old house, old building, and they opened up the ceiling. They cut the bottom rafter open and they put a adjustable buckle on it to bring it together. Yeah. That was a very unique one. It was an interesting idea, but not something that we could allow. So, I mean, they ended up having to take the building down in that case, but.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's been so many. I don't know.
Well, I know like one that did go through the process of permitting processing was like a telecommunications tower that went up.
Yep.
And that I think did actually have to go to some federal because there was no provincial regulation for it.
Yes. Well, towers are very unique.
Yeah.
So towers are federally governed.
Yeah.
And they have a process that is followed. And the tower installation is, so the communication has to hire somebody that actually follows the federal guidelines for the installation, unless the municipality has their own specific ones. And none of ours do.
Yeah. And
because that's a big task. So basically what our role would be in it is as far as the planning district, we would work for the municipalities on that, is is we would have to oversee that the company that's hired to follow that federal process has followed that process. So they at the end they provide us with a package of this is the location, and then they follow the process, and they submit that process at the end to us, and we have to review it to ensure that they followed it, and then we have to provide our sign off how we feel, indicating that it has been approved. And neighboring property owners don't always like that, and that's the hard one. But unfortunately, that's a situation where they feel that a municipality should have more hands-on and more approval, whereas we are limited because there's a federal process.
There is a process, and
our
I
job
read
is
through it, and it's
big.
very explicit.
It's
and
big, and there's lots in it. I've read it very thoroughly as well, and I'm glad our municipalities don't have one, because that would be a huge job to undertake if we did.
It's not something that comes up often enough, really, for most municipalities to need that, I would think.
Well, the actual approval, no, but we do, I would say at least a dozen times a year, we probably get inquiries on potential locations, yeah. And
so you're
so we, at the onset, it's usually, they're usually looking for if there's any concerns municipal wise, and not a property owner concern, like a land use concern, like what is the use of the land, is it compatible, is there resources in the land that need to be, like gravel or something, things like that. Those would be items that we would comment on. And
I think setbacks is the main one as well.
Well, for sure, because towers are 300 feet high. So they
don't want them falling on someone's house.
And yet again, that's federally regulated as well, unless zoning bylaws may have one, but usually the federal ones have been more stricter than what we would have. We don't have very any, right? So we do receive a lot of communication of potential ones, whether those people can make arrangements with landowners. Because it takes landowner approval, agreements with them before they'll even proceed. So sometimes they don't get that far and they pick another site, and then so we do. My office sees a few a year, 10 to 12. How many actually proceed to fruition of a tower? Not always even one a year. Sometimes it's 2 a year, but
So not. But so that's within the scope of things that you see is really everything from decks to. If it can go on private land, we should review it to some degree. Yeah, and you've probably seen it at some point. Yep. Yeah. We're running short of time, actually. Okay. But I did want to give you a chance. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to make sure the public understood about what you guys do, or what kind of goes on here? I don't think so. It's I would agree. It's a confusing process sometimes. People don't always just know that they can reach out to our office. Yeah. And we'll do our best to explain it and to advise them. That's what I would encourage. Just if you're unaware or you're not sure, please phone. Yeah. Because we won't do it just for the sake of doing it. If you don't need a permit, we're going to say you're good to go. Have at her. Yeah. Or we'll maybe just permit certain portions of it. So just please feel free to reach out. Yeah. We'll put your number up here. Don't be afraid of being in trouble. Just reach out. It's much better to contact you before doing anything. It's very much appreciated. Even if you say you can do that. You can still ask. Yep. Right. Yep. Yeah. And it's a yes. You can go ahead and do it. We don't need to do anything. Yeah. We do that a lot. So it's, like I say, we don't make work. So you're not going to get mad at someone for asking. No, not at all. No. And you're physically located within the town office. Yes, as well. We are in the back northeast corner of the town of Neepawa administration office, 275 Hamilton Street. So you're not part of the town of Neepawa, but you are located. We're located in their building. Yeah, it works well. Just being obviously the town of Neepawa is a large member for us, and it functions well within there. And it's certainly growing very quickly. Yep, so it is as much as it can. All right. Well, thank you so much for making time for me today. I have learned a lot. Hopefully, we've demystified some of these processes for people. And if they have any other questions, they are free to contact you anytime. For sure. All right. And thank all of you for joining us as well. We'll see you again next time.